welcome you all to the study of the Sabbath today, being the 1st of May. We are into the 5th month, the month where we have the day of Pentecost. I'd like to welcome you all to the study on this Sabbath so we can enjoy in the comfort of our homes, enjoy present truth. May I welcome you. Now our topic today, which I named the lamp to the ruler of the land. And we know in this topic, that's why we said how the Moabites missed out. They missed it. It was a narrow miss, the Moabites. We are going to learn this prophecy, and it's the prophecy of the book of Isaiah chapter 16, verse 1 to 5. We're going to enjoy this prophecy. We have never heard it being preached openly. People are just picking this and that story of that God promised through Timothy and said, beware, the last days they will be just talking about stories. So today, being in this story, in the prophecies, not the story, we're going to learn about this topic, the lamb to the ruler of the land. Now I want to know more about this prophecy in Isaiah chapter 16, verse 1 to 5. Let us read.
Verse 1.
Yeah.
Send ye the lamb to the ruler of the land, from Selah to the wilderness.
Right. Just stop where they send the lamb to the ruler of the land. Selah is the signature from God. Selah to the wilderness. So I want to know what he is actually talking about with that first sentence. And then when you read the whole, verse and understand what he's up to, read on this here. Start from send ye the lamb. Yeah?
Send ye the lamb
Right?
to the ruler of the land,
Right.
from Selah to the wilderness, unto the mount of the daughter of Zion.
Right.
For it shall be that as a wandering bird
Right.
cast out of the nest, so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon.
Right. So it's something quite complicated. You don't even know what the Bible is talking about. Unless you really understand it from the spirit of prophecy, you will never understand what God is about to say to us about that prophecy. The lamb sent to the wilderness, yeah, unto the mount of the daughter of Zion. But this lamb is being sent to the daughter of Zion. Where is this daughter of Zion? And where is this wilderness that is being mentioned? And then he says, for it shall be that as a wandering bird cast out of the nest, so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Ammon. So we are seeing these two people, the daughters of Moab, to the fords of Ammon. So these two tribes, we have to learn more about them, the Moabites and the Ammonites. Why is God talking about them and talking about the lamb sent to the Mount of Zion, to the wilderness? Now, all this is complicated. If you just say, I want the Bible and the Bible alone, what is he saying? You can't even know. So you need spiritual prophets to open up, to tell you exactly what God is talking about. For it is a prophecy of the last days. And then let's read up to verse 5, yeah?
Take counsel,
Take counsel.
execute judgment, make thy shadow as the night in the midst of the noonday. Hide the outcasts,
Right?
bewray not him that wandereth. Let mine outcast dwell with thee, Moab. Be thou a covert to them from the face of the spoiler.
Right?
For the extortioner is at an end. The spoiler ceaseth, the oppressors are consumed out of the land.
Right?
And in mercy shall the throne be established,
Right?
and he shall sit upon it in truth in the tabernacle of David,
Right?
judging and seeking judgment and hasting righteousness.
That's why I say this is the prophets of the last days, when God shall sit on the throne and judge. So, but what is he talking about from verse 1? We have to study and understand that prophecy. Before he comes, we should be knowing. Those candidates of the kingdom should know everything that God has said in the Bible. We cannot just hop in the cloud and leave all these prophecies with nobody knowing what God is talking about. And that is indicating that it's the last day when God is judging on the throne of David. So we have to study that. Now, when he says, from verse 1, he says, send ye the lamp to the ruler of the land from Selah to the wilderness, and to the mount of the daughter of Zion. This is what we have heard. Now let's read from 8TR 95.3. 8TR 95.3. Now it's the definite article, right?
The definite article, the, lends absolute meaning to the noun lamp, showing that a lamp, the only one of its kind, was the object of the command to send the lamp from Moab to the mount of the daughter of Zion,
Right. So,
Mount Zion in Jerusalem.
right. So this Mount Zion is the very Mount Zion in Jerusalem. That's where we see the lamp now standing with the 144,000 on Mount Zion. But now he's saying the lamp was sent from the Moabites. What is it now talking about? So why is the lamp being sent from Moab? Yeah, the lamp from Moab to the mount and daughter of Zion. Why from Moab? For we know when Christ came at first, he was in the lineage of Jesse. And now we are being told about Moab. It was supposed to be from Jesse, but we are being told from Moab. Now, why? This is a prophecy, isn't it? Now, let's read on again for the next, from Isaiah chapter 16, verse 2. For it shall be.
Right, sorry. For it shall be that as a wandering bird,
Right?
cast out of the nest,
Right.
so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon.
Now, we are being told about the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Ammon. How? As a wandering bird cast out of the nest. What is God talking about here? It's very difficult to understand without the Spirit of God. But we need to know this prophecy because it's for us who live in the last day when God is about to establish his kingdom. Now let's hear sacred history on the next 8.5, yeah?
Sacred history records that the one lamb
Right.
taken from Moab before the Moabites were cast out of their nest
Right.
was the one of whom John the Baptist said, Behold the Lamb of God.
Now that's the only lamp we know in the Bible. Which John the Baptist said, beware, behold the Lamb of God. It's the only one lamp who is indicated in the Bible, isn't it? Right? Let's hear.
The prophecy shows that the lamb was rushed from Moab to Mount Zion.
The prophet in Isaiah 16 shows exactly that this lamp
was rushed from Moab
was rushed from Moab
to Mount Zion.
To Mount Zion. But what is it that God is talking about? Now read on.
David's palace at Jerusalem.
That's where David's palace at Jerusalem was. Right?
An event which took place when Naomi with her sons went to Moab, the wilderness, a nation not under the direct care of the Lord,
Right?
and therefore not a vineyard, and brought Ruth, the Moabitess,
Right?
from Moab to Jerusalem.
Did the history show that this is exactly what happened? Ruth was taken from the Moabites. Is it true? Naomi took Ruth from the Moabites to Jerusalem. Is it true? That happened. History shows that. Right? And then let's hear.
For Boaz took Ruth,
Right?
and she was his wife.
Now, when Ruth was taken from the Moabites, she became Boaz's wife. This sacred history tells us that, right?
And she bare a son,
Right?
and they called his name Obed.
So Obed became the son of Ruth and Boaz. Is it true? Now let's hear.
Obed, he is the father of Jesse,
Right.
the father of David.
Right.
And Jesse begat David.
Now we are there, isn't it? Are we there?
Yes.
So we have seen the lineage, the genealogy of Christ. Because we knew Christ was from the tribe of Jesse, from the lineage of Jesse. But further from Jesse backwards, we find Ruth was the mother who came from the Moabites, went into Jerusalem, and was married to Boaz. And Boaz begat Obed. And Obed begat Jesse. And Jesse begat David. But where was all this lineage coming from? From the Moabites. Is it true? So now when we read Isaiah chapter 16 and say, send a lamb from the Moabites. Now we know exactly who is the lamb. It's Christ. Coming in the lineage from Ruth, who was from the Moabites. Now we begin to understand Isaiah 16. That who is this lamb coming from the Moabites? Why? When Christ was coming from Mary, he was not coming from Joseph. Because Joseph had not even slept with Mary when Christ was delivered. So now we see even the lineage of Christ is reckoned on Ruth, who was a Moabite. Who, when Ruth was taken by Naomi to Jerusalem, and next what happened? Ruth was married to to Boaz. And they beget Obed. Obed who also beget Jesse. And Jesse, David. And Christ came in the lineage of the Moabites. So you hear that? According to Isaiah chapter 16. Now let's read on. Right, on 96.1.
That's Christ, the son of David,
right,
was sent from Moab to Mount Zion,
right,
David's palace.
Right.
Thus showing Christ's divinity as the Son of God,
Right,
and his humanity as the son not only of David, but also of Lot the
right.
Moab.
So Lot also, when we are talking about the Moabites, what are we talking? The descendants of Lot. We heard that Lot is the father of the Moabites. That's why when you say send the lamb from the Moabites, we are now talking of Ruth. But where was Ruth also coming from? From Lot.
From Lot.
Did you hear that? Now let's understand more, right? On the next paragraph, point 2.
Oh, how wonderfully
Right?
particular is our God. The names,
Right?
Obed,
Yeah.
Jesse, and David,
Right.
in the Hebrew tongue, they mean Christ.
Those three names, they mean Christ. Right? Right?
A servant, Obed, who is to be my presence, Jesse, the beloved David.
Right. Did you hear? We are now learning sacred history involved in a prophecy on Isaiah chapter 16. And now we are being told, send the lamb out of Moab to where? To Mount Zion, to Jerusalem. Now, and then, so whatever is going to come there, we will understand fully now, as long as we have identified the genealogy of Christ coming from the Moabites. Did you hear that? And the Moabites, where do they come from? From Lot. These are descendants from Lot. Now, let's hear point 3, Christ.
Christ being in the flesh, a Moabite,
Right.
as well as an Israelite.
Right.
God said, let mine outcasts dwell with thee.
Right. We are in Isaiah chapter 16, verse 4. Let's read.
Let mine outcasts dwell with thee, Moab.
Right?
Be thou a covert to them from the face of the spoiler.
Now, we understand that verse more now. It says, let mine outcasts dwell with thee, Moab. Who is now this Moab?
It's Christ.
So when it says, let my outcast dwell with thee, who are the outcasts? The 10 tribes. They had been outcasts all this time when they were sent from Jerusalem, from Israel, and scattered all over. Now it says, let mine outcast dwell with thee, Moab, which is Christ, right? Be thou a covet to them from the face of the spoiler. Now, we'll understand that in full. Let's read on. And a man,
And a man, again pointing to Christ,
right,
shall be as in a hiding place from
now,
the wind.
This is Isaiah chapter 32, verse 2. A man, right,
Shall be as in hiding place from the wind.
Now, this is what we read from Isaiah chapter 32, verse 2. Verse 2, it says, a man, read it in full.
And a man shall be as in hiding place from the wind,
Right. As,
and a covert from the tempest,
right,
as rivers of water in a dry place,
right.
as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land.
Who is this man? Christ. What is he going to be?
A hiding place
A hiding
from
place.
the wind,
Right,
a covert from the tempest,
right.
and as rivers of water in a dry place,
Why?
a shadow.
Why would you need all that in the time of trouble, such as never was? The man will be a hiding place when the kingdom is established. Now let's hear more. Let's hear more on the next paragraph, point 97.1.
97.
8 here. Yeah.
Sent to take counsel, execute judgment,
Right?
make his shadow as the night in the midst of the noonday,
Right?
hide the outcasts, bury not him that wandereth.
Now this is the verse 16, chapter 16, verse 3. This is what we are reading, right? Let's hear.
Christ our hiding place from the wind,
Right?
and a covert from the tempest, in a weary land,
Right?
is a great and perfect shadow, even as midnight at noonday.
Right? Which is true. Right?
So also exclaimed the psalmist,
Right?
How excellent!
Excellent! How excellent is thy loving kind. That's a verse, isn't it? Psalms 36, verse 7. Is thy loving kindness, O God. Therefore the children of men. It's a verse, isn't it? Let's read the verse.
How excellent
Right.
is thy loving kindness, O God!
Right?
Therefore, the children of men
Right.
put their trust under the shadow of thy wings.
Right?
Because thou hast been my help, therefore in the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice.
This is what we sing. Under the shadow of thy wing. Psalms 36, verse 7. That's what we sing, isn't it? All the time. Right, let's hear more. Let's hear more about that.
And therefore, exclaims the gospel prophet also, shall the strong people glorify thee?
Right, we are reading Isaiah chapter 25, verse 3 to 4. Right.
Verse 3. Therefore, exclaims the gospel prophet also, shall the strong people glorify thee? The city of the terrible nations shall fear thee.
Right?
For thou hast been a strength to the poor, a strength to the needy in the distress, a refuge from the storm,
Right?
a shadow from the heat, when the blast of the terrible ones is as a storm against the wall.
Right. Go back to chapter 16, Isaiah 16, verse 5. Now, following there.
Verse
And
5.
in mercy, right?
And in mercy shall the throne be established.
Now, we are talking, Isaiah chapter 16 is talking of how the throne is going to be established. The kingdom is going to be established on Mount Zion. But who is going to establish that kingdom? The Lamb coming from where? From Moab. So Isaiah 16 is actually talking about how this kingdom is going to be established. Now, when we see it established, why? To provide a shelter in the time of trouble. Now, funny enough, when you're talking about the time of trouble, such as never was, without talking about the kingdom, then it means you're missing the point. You can't be talking about the 666 when there is no shelter for those, the saints. Where are they going to find shelter in the time of trouble? For look at the type. When in Egypt, the 7 last plagues, the first 3, they happening in both Goshen and Egypt. But the 7 last ones, they were only going to Egypt without Goshen. Did you see that? Now the type shows that in our time, the lamb from the Moabites, which is Christ, isn't it, is the one going to provide a Goshen for the saints. So it can't be a time of trouble without a shelter somewhere where the saints will hide from the tempest. The tempest that we sing. He hideth my soul. We sing it so much, isn't it? Where is the hiding place during the time of trouble? Where is it? You talk about the time of trouble, the 666, without talking about the kingdom. It's incomplete. It is only complete that when the time of trouble occurs, where are the saints? The saints are being taken and ushered into the kingdom where Christ will be providing a hiding place for those who are under his protection. Now here, let's read on. Christ therefore. You had started since according.
Yeah.
Yeah, since according to this scripture. Yeah.
Since according to this scripture, the establishment of Christ's throne is yet future.
It's future to us.
And since furthermore, it is to be set up in the tabernacle of David,
Right?
the which thing did not take place at his coming.
Right.
Christ, therefore, when he comes to reign in his forthcoming kingdom,
Right?
will sit on the throne of David.
That's what will happen. This is, where do we get that one? In Isaiah 66. Isaiah 16. It says, send the lamb to the Mount Zion. So the comfort of everyone will be provided on Mount Zion. When Christ comes, we see him coming to stand on Mount Zion with the 144,000, providing that shelter, establishing this future kingdom of glory, and coming in the lineage of David. So that will be the throne of David established, where Christ will come and rule in the future kingdom before the earth comes to an end. Are you prepared for that? Now let's hear more. Let's hear more.
And as he is then to judge,
Right.
seek judgment,
Right.
and to hasten righteousness, the entire action occurs just before the close of probation.
That will happen before the close of probation. Spirit of prophecy says it clearly. It is before the close of probation. And what?
The time in which he can hasten righteousness.
That's the only time when Christ will produce what is called righteousness in men. When he comes to establish the kingdom before the close of probation. Otherwise, how will you go to heaven without this righteousness? The righteousness, now, as we are now, there's no one who is righteous. Righteousness will be enhanced when the kingdom is started, and when Christ now draws everyone, sprinkles clean water, and all we have now is a heart of flesh instead of a heart of a stony heart. That's where the righteousness will be enhanced by Christ. Now we can't be talking about hopping in the cloud without this episode. This first episode of establishment of the kingdom before the close of probation, it will be done so that we are all pure before we go to heaven. Now let's hear. Where you are reading.
So, happily, this prophecy of Christ's genealogy and of his taking the reins in his own hands
Right.
was given for the admonition and learning of those who shall be living at the time of at the end of time,
Right.
when all these things shall come to pass. Supremely important, therefore, is the need to remember its all important lessons.
So we have to, because of that, we have to study Isaiah chapter 16. We have to study chapter 16. Now let's hear, seeing that lot, yeah.
Seeing that Lot, as well as Abraham,
Right?
appears in the genealogical
Why?
record of Christ.
Why are we being told of Lot and Abraham? Now, we see them appearing in the genealogy of Christ. Are they appearing in the genealogy of Christ?
They are.
Now we have got to study them, right? Because it's all there in the Isaiah chapter 16 we are studying. Read on, let's hear.
Seeing that Lot, as well as Abraham, appears in the genealogical record of Christ, the question naturally asserts itself.
Right?
Why should these two men be so greatly honored?
Yes, we can understand about Abraham. He is a man of faith. But what about Lot? Why does Lot come in? Because it's also important in the genealogy. We saw the Moabites, they're coming from Lot. And then we saw that's the genealogy where Christ also is coming from the Moabites. But now, why would Lot be also important? Why should we spend time studying about Lot? Why should we spend time studying about Abraham? Why? Now let's read on. Why are these two guys important?
And the answer awaits us.
Right?
Abraham obtained this great honor
right?
because he was faithful to the word of God
Right.
and never questioned it.
That's why we study about Abraham. He was not a questioner. He did not question. When he was told to take Isaac, he didn't question. He took Isaac and went. He was going to kill his own son. 17-year-old lad. He is going to kill at his strengthened age. You know, when you are watching television, you have somebody who has been stabbed and you hear the age and you see 17 years. Everybody cries. Why? It's still youth. That's a youth, and no one expects a youth to die. It's different from somebody who dies at 90 years or 80 years or 70 years. But 17 years, he was tested and he never questioned that. He took his son and went with him to slay him. But he didn't slay him, but he was supposed to do that, and he did not question. Now let's hear about him. That's why he's so important. That's why this man is a man of faith. God tested him with his own son. Now let's hear.
Abraham obtained this great honor
right?
because he was faithful to the word of God and never questioned it.
Right.
Although all things seemed destined to fulfill themselves contrary to his interests and to God's promises, though God promised to give the land to him and to his posterity for a perpetual possession, Abraham personally never obtained the promise.
Did he?
No.
If you see on Genesis chapter 17, all those promises that were promised to Abraham, that your sons will be the kings of the nations and you will stay in Canaan with all your sons, 12 tribes. But now, we only have 2 tribes in Israel right now. The 10 tribes are all scattered. Did he obtain that promise? He didn't. He did not obtain that promise. Now, let's hear more.
Besides, enduring these faith-trying tests,
right?
he waited 25 years for the promised son,
right?
Only to be commanded, when this only child was come, a young man, to sacrifice him
You see,
for a burnt offering.
What a test! When he was told you are going to have a son, how many years did he wait? 25 years, waiting for that promised son. He was a very old man, and Sarah was also old. But they were promised they were going to have a son. They stayed for 25 years. Would you stay for 25 years waiting for that promised son? He waited for the son. And only when he got that son, that's when the test came to kill the son. Only when he waited for 25 years, he could have said, how many years have I waited? 25 years, dear God. And I've got the only son. And then you tell me to go and kill that son. Now, let's hear.
Still, though through every trial, he never lost his faith in God.
Right.
But implicitly trusted in him and unreservedly obeyed his commands.
Still,
For this reason,
still after that, after he had been commanded to go and kill his own son, and instead there was a lamb provided. We know all the story, isn't it? You can imagine Abraham coming back. He could have said, so why did you make me waste all this time preparing everything, and even all the stress that I went. I mean, if you lived in our time, some people would go to court and say, I will sue you for stress. You stressed me You stressed me all this time preparing my son, and when my son have died, my son is really supporting it and everything. I'm now about to slaughter this son, and then you say, no, don't kill your son. Why all these 3 days and 3 nights walking and thinking that I'm going to kill my own, looking at my son, that I'm looking at the son for the last time. I'm just watching my son going to die. So much stress. He could have gone to sue and say, God, pay me for depression. If it was the kind of men who are there in this time who will sue you for all this wastage of time and stress and all you went through, and you could have got billions in compensation. Is it? Is it true? But you can see Abraham going down the mountain and say, yeah, this is what God, he was a victor. He said, I did well by obeying. I obeyed God. And this is what happened at last. When he walked down the mountain, he was someone who said, at least God, there was something he was looking at. He was looking for something from me, and I did not even consult Sarah about this son. I just did it alone, and God was proud of this man, who never questioned. Now, the only thing he wanted from Abraham is that he did not question. He never questioned. That's why he is a man of faith. How many people have questioned? How many people question? But we are being told about Abraham, the way he did not question just on that episode. That if it is done on any of us in our generation, you wouldn't get away with that. You would lose hope. You would say, I'll never trust God again. After making me do all these things, he just says, no, there's a lamp there. I'll never even worship God again. We could have even lost hope. But Abraham instead increased his faith to say, whatever you ask me. I've even shown him that the very child I waited for 25 years for, I was prepared to kill him. As long as it was a word coming from God, I would do it. What about us? The word comes to God to keep the feast and to say, how many times we have been worshiping without this feast? We have been worshiping about this, we just, but you hear clearly, you read clearly that God is calling for them. Do we match Abraham? Now let's hear more. We haven't even gone to the center of the study. Let's hear. Mm-hmm.
For this reason, God signally honored him. Mm-hmm. Yet the great lesson here to be learned is not so much from Abraham's experience,
right,
as from Lot's. For Lot...
So God says, we can't be spending more time on Abraham because everyone will salute Abraham. But there's one guy we have to see properly again, this Lot. There's something in him. If I think of Lot, I just think, what was in this, what was in his brain when he was following somebody who said, you know what, Lot? I've been with God. And he said, let's leave this country and go and stay in a country. You could have asked, have you been there? Have you been in Canaan? He says, no, I haven't seen it. So, how do we go? How do we get started? How then did this man called Lot believe without a textbook? How did he believe without the spirit of prophecy, without the Bible? Only somebody talking to him without anything. That's why the name of Lot is in the archive there as a genealogy for Christ's birth. Why? Because he also believed his uncle. This was not his father. This was an uncle coming to say, Lord, come on, come with me. Let's go. God has said, leave the air of the Chaldeans and go and settle in Canaan. And I've never been there, but let's go. Let's walk to Canaan. And that's where we will start. He could have questioned. There's so many questions there. There is so many questions. But he is also a man of faith. Now let's study about Lot. Let's hear. Mm-hmm.
Yet the great lesson here to be learned is not so much from Abraham's experience as from Lot's. For though Lot was not quite so generous as was Abraham.
Right. The very first thing we know about this guy is not as generous as Abraham. There are people who are not really generous. I know them. I don't know where you classify yourself. I know where I classify myself. You know, there are people who even, they know themselves that they cannot just give. No. They can't. They can't give. They would even, they can even clap you instead of giving you. There are people like that who will clap you and say, why did you ask for anything? Don't ask me. Don't ask me. There are people like that who know they are mean. But now, the very first biography from Lot is, he was mean. He was mean. Yes, he was mean. How could you, when you are sent to Canaan, and you know God didn't speak to you, God spoke to Abraham that he's going to settle in Canaan, and you are only someone who is escorting Abraham where he has been told by God to go and settle. But how could you go first and say, let me choose first this and that and that? You know, when Abraham was saying to Lord, you choose first, he could have said, no, it's not me who was sent here. It's you. You choose first. And by the way, who is older, me and you? He could have said that. Who is older to choose where to settle? You and me. He could have said that if he was not somebody mean. But because he's mean, he wants to choose first. He is very greedy and selfish. A mean person is also selfish. You know that. What? Their properties that are in a mean. That's why in Proverbs we say never spend a night in someone's in a house where someone is very mean. Never. Even when you are snoring in the bed, you will be listening to you. How many minutes have you been lying on that bed? Never. The Bible says never spend a night in a mean person's house. Say so. If you want, I can give you the verse. It's there. But he was mean. He couldn't think. A mean person cannot think. Reason properly. If you are mean, you don't reason. You see Abraham saying, you choose first. And you rush and choose. And a mean person always goes into blunders. Look at how blunderous his choice was. He chose Sodom and Gomorrah. And where was the destruction going to come? To Sodom. Why? A mean person wants luxury. He chose those places because he wanted luxury. That's a mean person. Lot, the very first biograph is, he's mean. And the uncle was saying, you choose first to Lot. Why? He knew he was mean. If he chose first, there was going to be war. So he says, you go for it first. Which place do you want to stay? And the spirit of prophet says he chose all the plains. When you want to plow, you can't go for the mountains, for the hills and mountains. He only left his uncle with the hills and mountains. But where are we saying the home of Abraham was? The beautiful home of Abraham was? In the hills and valleys. You go there, you find how they have decorated the hills and valleys as it was left before Abraham by Lot. Those places were not even destroyed, but Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. Where he chose. Now, so meanness does not pay. Meanness, if you are mean, you always be the loser, isn't it? Now, let's hear more about this mean person. The very first biography for this man is his mean. Right, let's hear.
Though Lot was not quite so generous as was Abraham, and not quite so willing to live apart from the world.
Right.
Still.
So he was mean. He was not as generous as Abraham, but he did not even want to leave the world. This is the property of someone who is mean. You give him the world, that's all that he wants. He is selfish. He wants everything to himself. Now let's hear.
Still, his faith in the promises of God to Abraham was as great as was the faith of Abraham himself.
But he had some faith. Don't mean, we have people like that, Christians who are mean, but who love God. I don't know how these two mix. But there's some who are able to mix the two. I don't know. I don't know how you mix the two, love God and be mean. I don't understand, because once you love God, you are generous. But there are some who are able to make sure they love God. When God says, okay, give me, pay your tithe, they don't pay. They're mean. Because They want God, but when it comes to their property, no. That's why Christ had to say to that rich man, he said, go and sell everything and distribute to the poor, and then we'll see whether I keep all the 10 commandments that you say, I keep the commandments, I do this and that. Sell everything and distribute to the poor. Then we'll prove you really love God. Now here, he was man, but he had some degree of faith. Right? Let's hear.
His faith in the promises of God to Abraham,
right,
was as great as was the faith of Abraham himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, in some respects, even greater.
It was even greater because he was greater. Let's see where he was greater than Abraham. Because the Spirit of Prophecy says his faith was even better, greater than Abraham. But he was men, but he had a greater faith. I have never seen these two mixing. But let's study more about that. Let's hear.
For God spoke to Abraham in person.
So, because he had no reference to whether God had really spoken to Abraham, so he had a greater faith. Abraham knew he heard the voice of God, and God actually spoke to him. So his faith is, he actually heard the voice of God. It's different from someone who didn't hear the voice, who is being told as a second person. It's very different. If you hear the voice, you actually hear even the tone of the words. You actually have more faith because you heard. But Lot did not hear even, it was up to him to believe his uncle or not. It was up to him to say, I think you are faking. You just want to go there and you want me to go with you. It was up to Lot. There was no Bible. My dear friends, there was no Bible, there was no Spirit of Prophecy. I can hear people saying, oh, you say we should keep feast. Show me in the Bible. Prove to me. If you can come and prove to me from the Bible and from Spirit of Prophecy, want to see. That's not the faith of Lot. The faith of Lot had no Bible, had no Spirit of Prophecy, just heard from the mouth. Let's keep the feast. That's what Lot was being told. Let's go to Canaan and keep the feast. He didn't say, give me the Spirit of Prophecy, because these were heathens. The Babylonians who are being picked to go to Canaan to keep the feast. He did not say, give me the Spirit of Prophecy, or give me the Bible. Which verse actually? He did not say that. He believed just from the word. And he went. So his faith is more than Abraham's, because Abraham heard the voice, but he did not hear the voice. He believed a second-hand information. Now let's hear that.
God spoke to Abraham in person, whereas he spoke to Lot through Abraham.
Through Abraham. So he didn't hear. He didn't hear God. He could have disbelieved Abraham. He could have said, I don't believe you. God speaking to you. When? Why didn't you call me so I can hear also? He could have said that. But he has more faith because he had, what he heard was a second-hand information from Abraham, who was saying, it's God who said we should go. So it was up to him to say yes or no, to believe or not believe. Now let's hear.
Lot, therefore, had to have implicit confidence that God had spoken to him through Abraham.
So it took implicit confidence from Lot to believe a man telling him that God has said it in his ears without anyone who witnessed it. Demanded implicit confidence. Do you have that implicit confidence? Or you want so many volumes of researches so that you can prove, now I have to keep them the feast because I've seen the volumes telling me, some will say, can you prove to me whether the Sabbath is on Saturday? So that person cannot believe without his reading from somewhere, which is good. But Lot didn't do that. Lot believed that the uncle was really correct. The uncle had spoken to God, and this is from God. And some even read the Bible and still don't believe. You give them the quotes, still they remain stagnant without believing. They even insult you more when you give more evidence. They are not like Lot. Lot was not like that. Now let's hear more about this guy, Lot. Yeah.
As in the days of Abraham.
Right.
Moreover, there was no Bible.
There was no Bible.
By which to prove that his going from his father's house was in fulfillment of prophecy.
There was no Bible to prove what Abraham had said. But Lot believed without the Bible. You remember the Bible was written by Moses later on when they were coming from Egypt. So those people who lived in an age where there was no Bible had more faith than us, brethren. God has been worshipped by people who had no evidence from the Bible and spiritual prophets, who only have evidence from the prophet telling them. That's it. So how strong is our faith more than the antediluvians, who lived where there was no Bible, where there are no spiritual prophets, nothing. They only believe what the prophet said with his mouth. Now here, even in the time of Sister White, the prophet was there. But how many believed? How many believed? The prophet, they rejected A.T. Jones and Wagona, who were sent by God. They rejected even Sister White. Don't be fooled that they believed Sister White. Nobody believes Sister White. They rejected her. If they believed, why are there some of them still eating meat? Because she's preached against it. Why? So you don't be fooled. Lot was much better. He had no spiritual prophets, nothing. We have spiritual prophecy volumes, I don't know how many. The New Estate, the Old Estate, everything we have, the Bible itself. But still, and God has even given us even prophets who will never even guess they were prophets. They came, they worked and finished their time and died without anyone believing. And now we are at the edge, at the borders where Christ is to come. And he knew that he sent prophets and we never even guessed there was a prophet. And he sends even the last prophet of the hour who is even worse off. How do we prove our faith better than Lot's faith? I don't know. You understand? Now let's read on. Let's enjoy this study. Yeah.
As in the days of Abraham.
Right.
Moreover, there was no Bible, by which to prove that his going from his father's house was in fulfillment of prophecy.
Right.
And that God was leading him to depart from Ur of the Chaldees to go to a land, the whereabouts of which he himself knew not.
Right.
We see that Lot was not like most men today, who question and criticize everything in the unfolding of truth.
How many times did God send the righteousness by faith? Send it with A.T. Jones and Wagon. No one believed. Send it in the last days. Now people are keeping the feast. Still they don't want to believe. How many times do we surpass the faith of Lot? Lot had nothing. Nothing to prove, to say whether they are going into Canaan is the fulfillment of any prophecy or whatever, so that they are strong and confident in their faith. Nowhere to prove. Nothing. But he had faith. That is God who has led them to go out. It's God who has spoken to his uncle Abraham. Now let's hear.
Without the slightest questioning or doubting, we put his trust in Abraham's God.
Right?
And confidently followed in the quest for the promised land.
So it means Lot was now confident that my uncle speaks with God. Yeah? We have prophets. They've worked. Even Sister White worked. The people were not even confident God was speaking through Sister White. They sent him for mesmerism test, for testing all this, to see whether it's actually coming from God. That's why people say she would close her eyes, she won't blink, she won't breathe, she won't what. So many people believed after that sign, isn't it? And someone was saying, okay, if we have a prophet, we know that a prophet comes and it does not blink, does not breathe. This is what Sister White was doing. I said, okay, what about William Miller? Did he blink? And what about A.T. Jones and Wagona? Did they blink? Or did they stop breathing? Or what? So if you have that sign, you are looking for it. Without looking for a sign, God has given us a sign in the Bible how to prove anyone whether right or wrong, to the law and to the testimony, not to the breathing, not to the blinking. Why did Sister White blink? Why did Sister White not breathe? because she was in front of people who will never believe. We had terrible unbelief. So God had to make her make those signs so that they believe. Why? Why wouldn't they believe? Because the teacher to Sister White, William Miller, had led people to expect the coming of Christ on earth, and Christ did not come on earth. So they were now full of unbelief. So when Sister White came, God had to make that added sign to make sure those people who follow her believe. Then God did not say that was a criteria for the whole generations to make a prophet not breathe, not blink, not breathe. It was not a criteria because we have prophets before. Jeremiah, Isaiah, they never did that. We have prophets before who never even did what Sister White did. So, how do we prove this one is a prophet? We go to the law and to the testimony. Read from the Bible and the spirit of prophets. And that person has been sent. Do you understand? So we don't use that criteria which was used when God saw the situation was people were now full of unbelief. Why? Because there was a disappointment. There was a disappointment in 1844. So they needed those signs. They needed those signs so that they come to their senses. So you also need those signs so that you come to your senses and then start believing. Yet we have the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. Now let's read on. Let's hear.
What a contrast.
What a contrast, yeah.
What a contrast between the character of Lot and that of the Jews who rejected the prophets and even put them to death.
Right?
For this reason, God honored Lot with the greatest gift heaven could bestow upon a human being.
Right?
Sharing the earthly parentage of the Lord of glory,
Right.
the eternal King.
Right. So Lot, that's why they had to pick Lot. It was not because he had more faith. No. He was picked because God said, hey, this man, just believe. Just like that. When Abraham speaks, he just believes. He even leaves his own house and follows Abraham. Because Abraham had a strange doctrine in the era of Chaldees. They were not keeping feasts then. So his doctrine was strange. Because his father Terah was an idol worshipper. So he was bringing something strange in his region, which only Lot, a nephew, joined and believed. So God had to honor Lot for believing a strange doctrine which the rest were not believing. Just that. Going with Abraham to keep the feast in Canaan. Just that. The spirit of prophet says, God honored Lot, for he did not have evidence. What about you? You are rejecting with all the evidence, the Bible and the spirit of prophets. The prophets are there. You are rejecting. God knows how much light he has given. Greater light, greater evidence he has given, but you still don't believe. How do you stand against Lot? Now let's hear more.
Although, furthermore, Lot's descendants,
right,
the Moabites and the Ammonites, were no better than the other heathen.
Right.
Yet, for Lot's sake, God did not deal with them as he did with the rest of the heathen, but commanded Moses to distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle. For I will not forgive thee.
You remember when the Israelites were coming from Egypt? And when you go to part of the prophet, you find that topic on the journey through Moab. You will find they were told, because in every region they were going through, they would fight those people, destroy their temples, destroy everything and pass through. But they were told not to fight Moab and Ammonites. Who were the Ammonites? The descendants of Esau. And why the descendants of Moabites were they not to fight them? It was because they were descendants of Lot. This was a token for Lot, who believed Abraham without any other evidence. So God clearly gave instructions to the Israelites, do not fight the Moabites when you pass through. And you remember when they were passing through, can you just pass through, won't touch anything, nothing. And that king was there. The king of the Moabite was a very stupid king, a stupid king. And you know what he did? He says, who is Israel that I should bow to them? He did not even know his descendant, where he's coming from, that he's connected to Israel. You know, you go and read that story, you find it was amazing, and how they were destroyed after that, after they did not act promptly when Israel asked to pass through the land of Moab. Now, let's hear now. God had instructed that you shouldn't distress. Read the ways.
Distress not the Moabites,
Right?
neither contend with them in battle.
That was instruction from God.
For
Not
I will
to-
not give thee of their land for a possession.
And even their land, because wherever they were going, they will take the land. They'll destroy everyone and take the land. But now God is saying, when you do that to the Moabites, you won't even get their land. Why? Because these were descendants of Lot. Now, let's hear more.
Because I have given Ar unto the children of Lot for a possession. And when thou comest nigh over against the children of Ammon, distress them not,
Right?
nor meddle with them. For I will not give thee of the land of the children of Ammon any
Right.
possession, because I have given it unto the children of Lot for a possession.
Right. So you see how God had honored Lot because of just one action. What action? Joining Abraham while Abraham had a strange doctrine which their own people were not keeping. They were not keeping feast. They were not keeping feast. Now he's introducing the keeping of the feast, which he is going to do in Canaan. That was strange. And Lot joined Abraham, and God honored Lot for joining that doctrine which belonged only to God, not to the heathen practices. Now let's hear more.
And if any man serve me, said Jesus,
Right, in John chapter 12, verse 26, that's where you are reading, right?
let him follow me.
Right, if any man, if any man serve
Serve
me,
me.
anyone who says I serve God, not those ones in Isaiah chapter 4, which says they were saying we'll eat our own bread, we wear our own apparel, we only want your name. No. If you want to really serve God, have his name and also do what he wants. What is, if any man serve me, what shall he do? Yeah?
Let him follow me.
Follow God.
And where I am,
Yeah.
they shall also my servant be.
Don't call yourself a Christian and you don't follow God. If you want to call yourself a Christian, follow God. Follow and do his instructions. Now, if any man...
And where I am, sorry. And if any man serve me, said Jesus, let him follow me, and where I am, they shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor.
Right. Who is going to be honored? If any man serve me, don't only trust, but obey. And the Father will also honor you.
Amen.
He will only honor those who serve him. Right? And next,
Psalms 91 verse 15.
right?
Also, ye shall call upon me, says the psalmist.
They have a right to call upon God. If you serve God, you have a right to say, God, I need the healing blessing when you are sick. God, I need food when you are hungry. God, I need this protection when you are in trouble. So you have the right because you follow God. You serve him and you follow him. You have the right to call upon his name. Now here,
Ye shall call upon me, said the psalmist,
right?
and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble.
In trouble?
I will deliver him
Uh-huh.
and honor him.
Right. How many troubles do we have on earth? But it says, when you serve me, when you say you serve me, follow me. How do we follow him? Do what he said to his people. He told, this is the reason why God took Abraham from the Ur of the Chaldeans to follow him, to serve him. How did he serve him? Go to my country and keep the feast. This is what he was a Babylonian. Before he kept the feast, he was a Babylonian. Under his father Terah, who was an idol worshipper. But when he now wanted to serve God, God took him to go to Canaan to keep the feast. If you are not keeping the feast, you are a Babylonian. It's simple. That's why we say Babylon is fallen. Babylon is fallen. Fallen is Babylon. Why? You're not keeping the feast. You are not keeping the feast. This is the reason why Abraham was taken from the Ur of the Chaldeans to keep the feast. What is keeping the feast? To follow God. He was taken to follow God. Now read on, let's hear.
Aside from the happy deed
Right?
of showing hospitality to the angels who visited Sodom. On Genesis 19 verse 1. The noblest act in the spotty record of Lot's life is that he joined Abraham
Right?
in his newly found and strange religion.
Why would God go to Abraham to tell him his secret, to say we are going to Sodom to destroy? He knew that Abraham will be mindful of Lot, his nephew. This is the reason why he rescued Lot from Sodom before destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. Why? He joined the strange doctrine of following God, of worshipping and keeping his feast. This, he honored him for that. He honored Lot for that. He made sure before destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, because he joined Abraham. Is it not Abraham, the father of the feast? He is. That's why we say, when we say Abraham is the father of faith, we actually say he is the father of the feast that we are rejecting. That's what we are saying. So if we are saying he is the father of this feast, why did he leave Heir of the Chaldeans? He kept the feast. This is what is kept in his land. Now here, Lot, who joined him, when none in the Heir of the Chaldeans wanted to keep the feast, but Lot wanted to keep the feast with Abraham, when the rest were doing idolatry and idol worshipping. But God remembered Lot before destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. Now let's hear more.
The noblest act in the spotty record of Lot's life is that he joined Abraham
Right?
in his newly found and strange religion.
Right.
And that in order to do so,
Which religion? Which religion was it? Let's go to Genesis chapter 26. Which religion was this pertaining to Abraham? Which one was it? Genesis chapter 26, verse 5 there. What was Abraham doing?
Genesis 26, verse 5. Because that Abraham,
Listen to the religion that Abraham had. What is it? Is it not the one for the statutes of the feast, or which is in Malachi 4, verse 4 to 5, which says, I will raise Elijah the prophet with the statutes and judgment. Is it the same religion? Let's hear.
because that Abraham
Right?
obeyed my voice,
Obeyed God's voice.
kept my charge,
Kept the charge.
my commandments,
Commandments.
my statutes,
Statutes.
and my laws.
Did you see he was a statute keeper? What God gave on Nehemiah chapter 9 verse 13 are the statutes and the commandments and his laws. So this is what Abraham was keeping. And now God is saying, because he kept the charge. What is this charge? The feast, the statutes, the commandments, the laws. Because he kept that. Now let's hear. A sentence will start with a because. Listen, if you're an English speaker, a sentence starts with a because. But here the Bible says because. Did you hear that? Now start the because. Let's hear.
Because that Abraham obeyed my voice,
Right?
and kept my charge, my commandments,
Two.
my statutes,
Three.
and my laws.
Do you see he was a statute keeper? Now the strange doctrine which he had, which made Lot honored by God by joining Abraham, who had a strange doctrine. He was a feast keeper. He was a commandment keeper. He kept God's charge. And this is God's charge, which invites heaven to give you all these blessings that they gave to Lot, who joined that. That is called strange doctrine. Did you hear? When we are reading there, we are seeing the reason why Lot was honored. He joined the strange doctrine. Do you see what is strange there? You see when Christ came and they were saying, they said here the strange doctrine. Do you see what was strange there? Do you see what was strange? And then Paul and the disciples, they were being beaten 5 times for a strange doctrine. Do you see what strange was? What strange doctrine were the feasts, were the commandments, were the statutes, were the judgments. Those were termed by the Bible strange doctrine to the heathens. Did you hear? Strange to the heathen. You want the popular ones, which the heathens will want. That's why it will make you Babylon, because you are just the same as the wheat of the heathens. You are a heathen because you believe the same as heathens. But those who joined the strange doctrine, God will honor them. Now let's go back to the paragraph. What says? What does it say, that paragraph? Yeah.
One of the noblest acts in the spotty record of Lot's life
Right.
is that he joined in his newly founded strange religion, and that in order to do so, he departed from both his father's house
1,
and his homeland,
2.
knowing not whither he was going.
He didn't even know, he knew that he is now a feast keeper and a commandment keeper. He didn't even bother leaving his family. He didn't even bother leaving his country. He didn't even bother without even knowing where he was going. As long as he was a commandment keeper and a statute keeper, he knew God was going to be with him everywhere where he goes. Now, we see Joseph, who was sold as a slave, because he was a statute keeper. He was a commandment keeper. He was distinct wherever in the house of Pharaoh. He was distinct with a distinct spirit, which people say we have one man. We have one man here. We have a strange spirit, which no other people have. You understand? It is strange to the world, but it is familiar in heaven. Did you hear? It is familiar. But if your spirit goes along with the world, it's not the one that God is looking for. Because each keeping of whatever law has its own spirit. If you keep the pagans, you have a spirit of the pagans. If you keep the statutes of God, you have got the spirit of God. Do you understand? Now, let me tell you one thing. Lot was honored because there was a strange doctrine in that area, which Abraham only wanted to keep. Was a keeper, was struggling to keep the statutes while he was in Air of Chaldeans. And God said, the only thing I can do to this person is make him go to the Holy Land. That's where everything he's trying to practice, that's where it is practiced there. That's why he had to take him to the Holy Land, where it was designed by creation for the keeping of the statutes. That's why we find the statutes being kept in that area. Why? Because God put an X, a sign to say they will be kept here. That's why it says 3 times a year you have to go there, because that's where God designed the place for the time for the statues to be kept. Did you hear that? Did you hear? Now, read one. Let's hear.
Besides receiving, consequently, the everlasting blessing of being one of the earthly progenitors of Christ,
Right?
a blessing which he shall realize through Christ at the glad resurrection day,
Right.
and rejoice in throughout eternity.
Right?
He did not go wanting for temporal blessings.
No.
And while surrounded with earthly danger, heaven sent angels even delivered him from the doomed city of Sodom before it was reduced to ashes.
You see, before Sodom was reduced to ashes, heaven sent a deliverer for this family, which was joining Abraham in this strange doctrine of keeping the feasts and the commandments. God made sure this family is going to be saved first before destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. Now we're talking about Lot, my dear. How better are you to this guy? How better are you? Now, let's hear more.
Had he waited, though, for greater evidence as to whether or not God was leading him in this most momentous event of his life,
Right?
had he said in his heart, I take no chance,
Right?
but shall wait until this venture proves
Like
successful.
others will say, oh, let me wait and see. Oh, let me just wait. I will start. Yeah, this thing is nice. I think, yeah, this is good. I've enjoyed your study. Yeah? I've enjoyed it. Let me think and ponder and pray about it. Had he done that, he would have lost all these benefits. Yeah, how many people are waiting and saying, really, this is good? Yes, I know it. This is good. I always say this is a good gospel. This is, but it's not a hearsay. You have got to do it promptly. It's a prompt gospel. The gospel needs prompt decision. It needed prompt decision to Lot, to make sure he joins Abraham straight away. Had he dilly-dallied, what was he going to have? Nothing. He was going to die a heathen there in Babylon, heathen in Air of the Chaldeans. How many people are stuck to the spiritual Babylon? of the day. How many are stuck to this Babylonian system? How many? What is the Babylonian system of not keeping feasts? Yes, they were not keeping feasts in Babylon. They were not keeping feasts, neither were they keeping even commandments, because they say these precepts were given to make it possible for you to keep the 10 Commandments. So if you do not have the precepts which were given to guard the Decalogue, so what commandments are you keeping? Now it's a hidden life. Do you understand? It's hidden. Take more chances, you lose everything. That's why I said in the topic, how the Moabites lost it all. The Moabites lost it. Why? They kept on dilly-dallying. These daughters, we have been told by Isaiah 16, the daughters, they stayed with Ammon. Whilst the lamb went to establish the kingdom. The daughters, who are the daughters? The daughters of the heir of the Chaldeans. They stayed on while Lot and Abraham went out. And these are the people who became the progenitors of this wonderful gospel. While all their people, he said, Abraham, Lot, left his own people, left his own country, left everything associated with him, and he went where he only knew God, nothing more, in a land he had never seen. But those who remained, who were part of him, they will be destroyed. They won't be rescued. They won't have the blessing that Abraham and Lot had. Now we are seeing, one, the lamb came from the land of Moabites through Ruth, isn't it? But are the Moabites going to be saved without joining the lamb? Are they? Now let's hear more. Mm-hmm.
I take no chance, but shall wait until this venture proves successful.
Mm-hmm.
I shall first investigate and know for surety that the land is fertile.
Yet he said, I shall first investigate and see whether the land is fertile, where I'm going to go. That's what we do, isn't it? When you want to go somewhere, then you say, I'm going to greener pasture. Is it? I want to go to greener pasture. But if he took that chance to say, let me first investigate about the land where we want to go. Before taking chances, let me just find out first. If he ever did not act promptly, what would happen? Let's see. What else would he had considered? No?
He never would have had a part in the movement itself.
Even in the movement, he wouldn't have joined it. So meaning, there is a movement. We should be keeping the feast. There is a movement. We should join Abraham. When you want to join the Abraham movement, you join the movement which keeps the feast. That's the movement which Lot joined. Now let's read on.
He never would have had a part in the movement itself,
right?
Or in the paternal lineage of the Lord of glory,
right?
Or in his eternal kingdom.
Right. So it started by Abraham leaving his own kinsmen, that movement, and joined by the nephew on. There were no numbers. It's only one person who joined. Lot and his wife. But they were just the minority. Not the whole of the heir of the Chaldeans. The rest remained Babylonians. And he joined this movement to go and keep the feast in Canaan. And when he joined this movement, those who are going to be Abraham's, he was shown in Genesis chapter 17 that your seed will be as minute as the land, the sand, and as many as the stars in heaven. But who are these seed? Who will join Abraham with his strange doctrine of keeping feasts and commandments? Not who remain with the Moabites or who remain with the Babylonians, no. But who will join the strange doctrine of keeping feasts, like it was with Lot joining Abraham. Now let's read on.
All these things happened unto them for ensamples.
1 Corinthians 10, verse 11.
Verse 11.
All these things, yes?
All these things happened unto them for ensamples,
right?
And are written for our admonition,
right?
Upon whom the ends of the world are come.
Right.
Oh, let us follow them.
Right.
In the footsteps of this great man of God, trusting his immutable word and acting upon it without the slightest hesitation.
Let's act upon it without this light. Now, where is the problem? Let's go to the next paragraph. There's the great obstacle. Where is the obstacle which people are finding? Where is the obstacle now? The great obstacle.
GC 380.
It's from Great Controversy, page 380 and 460. Let's hear the greatest obstacle in people joining movements. Or we saw from the first angel message, second, third, and fourth, and fifth. People joining in, some left behind, some joining the next movement. Where is the obstacle that causes people not to join in? Right, let's hear.
The greatest obstacle, both to the acceptance and to the promulgation of truth, is the fact that it involves inconvenience and reproach.
Is it not true? The greatest obstacle both to the acceptance and to the promulgation of truth is that the fact that it involves inconvenience and reproach. One, let's ponder on those two words. Is there any inconvenience to the strange doctrine? Yes, in Lot's time, there was an inconvenience. What is it? He left his family. It means the family did not understand Lot. That's an inconvenience. When the truth comes to you, the family won't understand you. Most people see it happening and they don't know that it's nobody's fault. It's the fault of the truth. That's the truth that causes that. That's why God says, I've given you fire from this time to 5 from one family will be separated. That's the greatest inconvenience of the truth. Once you start that truth, which is strange, which was strange in Abraham's day and Lot's day, the very first thing is the people around you they notice that, and they start giving you attitudes. Is it? That's the inconvenience. That's the inconvenience. Why would they leave their kindred? They wouldn't tally, they wouldn't fit in. Why? Because that was strange to them. That's the greatest inconvenience. That's Great Controversy is talking about 380. He said the greatest inconvenience when the truth comes, it separates you with your kindred. It involves that inconvenience. Now let's hear, and the other one is
reproach.
It also involves reproach. It's the very reproach. Look at how the reproach was done to 80 Jones and Wagon. When the truth came with these two guys, they even ended up going to the pub. Why? Because of the reproach around them from the brethren. And God's sister once said they were all written down. Those people who were responsible for that reproach to these two guys, they are all kept in heaven. That record, they are going to be punished for that. So, don't mind about the reproach. Don't mind. This truth has to do with those who are selfless. Don't even think of yourself, how are people going to think about me? I've got this doctrine which other people are not, they are not even keeping the feast. I'm now a vegetarian and they are still eating their meat. And don't worry about that. It is chronicled in the spirit of prophecy. That's the greatest inconvenience that you have got to overcome. You should know exactly what this truth is going to do to you. The truth, one, will involve the greatest hatred from your brethren, the greatest reproach, the greatest inconvenience. Why? You step in the house and find all of them are eating meat. You have got to stand with the truth. You have got to, that's where it comes to be very highly temperate. It means you have got to suppress everything in your system. We say, go for it. It's smelling nice. Smelling nice. No, you have got to stand by it. That says the Lord. This is what makes you win. Now, that's the greatest inconvenience. Let's hear the other inconvenience. The other thing here. Yeah?
This is the only argument.
This is the only argument
against the truth,
right,
which its advocates have never been able to refute.
Right.
But this does not deter the true followers of Christ.
This did not bother Lot at all. He knew people now hated him and his aunt. But it did not bother them because they were happy with God. They were happy with God. Luke chapter 6 says, let's go to Luke chapter 6. Luke chapter 6 verse 22 says what?
Verse 22.
This should actually be bread and butter when people hate you for the truth. Now let's hear. Verse 22.
Blessed are ye
Blessed are ye
when men shall hate
when
you,
men shall hate you,
and when they shall separate you from their company,
and also disfellowship you,
and
from
shall
their
reproach
company,
you,
and reproach you,
and cast out your name as evil
and even cast your name as a devil.
for the Son of Man's sake.
This is, they are doing it for the Son of Man's sake. And verse 26
Verse 26.
is where most people want. What do they
Woe
want?
unto you,
Woe unto
when
you,
all men shall speak well
when
of you.
all men shall speak well of you.
For so did their fathers to the false prophets.
This is what people want when they stand in front of a large crowd and the old people say, yeah, 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 yeah. It says, God says, woe unto you. This they did to the false prophets. Is it? That is proof enough you are false. Why? Because if it was correct, nobody should cheer like that. So how many people are scratching everywhere looking for likes and for views? How many views I've got? It is 70 million, 40 million, but woe unto you. Woe unto you, for so did them to the false prophet. Why? Because you have got something very common to everyone. Something common to everyone. When it comes from God, it's not common as you think. You send a post from God, it will have even 0 likes or 1 like. Then you know it was from God. Don't think they didn't see it. They saw it. That's why they did not like it. Why? Because the spirit and the world, they don't agree. So whoever is going to like it is 1 out of million. You know, Lot was the only one in Sodom and Gomorrah who went out, whose family went out. Only 1. So if he had to cast any post there in Sodom, who was going to like it? Who was going to like that post from Lot? Now people are scratching for these likes and they want too many likes. How many people have liked me? How many people have liked me? You know what they're liking? So something which is common. But something, if it is strange, no likes, then you know, woe unto you if you are scratching for them. They're busy every time scratching for something that will create more likes, You know, you haven't started. It means you've not started. Once you start, you have got to contend with people who reproach you. Contend with the people who with greatest inconveniences. What inconvenience? When it starts with you eating everything, and then you are told, no, you have to be highly temperate. So that's an inconvenience already. You have got to stop this and stop that and stop that and stop that, right? For you to be temperate, right? You have got to stop. You have got to make sure to adhere to the word of God, what the word says, right? When it says sleep 8 hours, then it means you have to sleep 8 hours. Otherwise, you make yourself ill. When it says drink 8 full glasses a day, you have got to do that. When it says avoid all these other foods which are very highly inflammative in your bloodstream, you have to be very strict and temperate. Then those are the inconveniences, because all the people who do not want to worship God, they live a luxurious life. And do you know what? That luxurious life is very short. Miserable and short. But if you want to enjoy with God, do what He says, and you enjoy living a life which is meaningful. You understand? Now here it's the greatest.
This is the only argument
Uh-huh.
against the truth which its advocates have never been able to refute.
Right?
But this does not deter the true followers of Christ.
No.
These do not wait for the truth to become popular.
They don't wait for the truth to become popular. So people want, when they hear something, they want to ask, is so and so, does so and so have it? Does so and so have, know about this truth? Does so and so do it? That's why they are waiting for truth to become popular. Then they'll say, all right, I'm comfortable because so and so also is doing the same thing as I'm doing. So and so and so. They wait for the truth to be popular. But those candidates of the kingdom, they don't wait for truth to be popular. As soon as they know it's from God, they move on like Lot. They catch on to it promptly like Lot. Now let's hear.
Being convinced of their duty, they deliberately accepted the cross.
Right.
With the Apostle Paul counting that our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory.
Right.
With one of old esteeming the reproach of Christ greater than the riches in Egypt.
Right. Read on, let's hear.
Both the Moabites and the Ammonites,
Right.
being of the descendants of Lot, and Lot being one with Abraham. Also the Edomites, being the descendants of Esau,
Right.
Jacob's twin brother,
Right.
to all of whom God declared, but in the fourth generation they shall come hither again.
Right.
They should therefore have known that the time had come for the fulfillment of that long expected event,
Right.
and should accordingly have been ready for it. Or, had they lost sight of the truth, then they should have recalled it when they saw the movement that was now at their very borders.
Right.
Had they believed in Abraham's God, as Lot believed,
Right.
they would not have refused to let the children of Israel, their blood relatives, pass through their country to the promised land,
You see,
but
what
rather
there.
would have joined with them,
Right.
as Lot joined with Abraham to help them possess it.
Right. So even these Moabites, when God was saying to the Israelites when they are coming from Egypt, when you pass through the Moabites, don't kill them, don't do anything. The Moabites, they stopped them passing through their land. Why? They did not read history. They did not know that these are the very brethren where Abraham comes, where the very Abraham walked with Lot. They were coming from Lot. They could have known from sacred prophecy that this had been prophesied in Genesis. Now, they did not allow them, and yet they knew these are their brethren. You understand? How many do not know the truth because they don't know the prophecies? They don't even know what is happening now. Because the prophecy does not tell them what is happening now, because they don't even read the prophecies to see what is happening now. These were predicted before that this was going to happen. But they did not know anything about this prophecy. Now let's hear, indeed, the Moabites.
Indeed, the Moabites went so far in their hostility toward their relatives that they even hired Balaam to curse them.
You see
In
who hired
spite-
Balaam in the wilderness? It's the Moabites. You know, when Balaam was hired to go and curse Israel, was coming from the Moabites, the very descendants of Lot.
In spite of the fact that God, in putting the Israelites in mind of his promises to Lot, commanded them that they harm not their brethren. Thus, in declining to welcome them and to grant them safe conduct through the land, the Moabites not only refused to acknowledge God's wondrous providence,
Right?
but also rejected him in the person of his people, whom they well knew he had led with signs and wonders out of the land of Egypt.
Who are refusing the feast? Who are refusing the movement of the feast? Are they not the same people that were supposed to be enjoying that movement? The same brethren of the people that are in the feast movement are the ones that are standing as a hard block. When you go to the heathens or those people who are not even keeping Sabbath, these feasts are being kept already. They are already being kept. You go to the Feast of Tabernacle. When you see they lock up the whole streets of Jerusalem and you see people marching from different countries who are not even Sabbath keepers. But the very Sabbath keepers are the ones standing against the feast keeping. But look at how many people have finished with that gospel outside there. How many? Now, the Moabites are the very ones who had to hire Balaam to fight against the movement, the Israelite movement, so that they don't walk through the Moabite land. Now, let's hear more.
May this tragic lesson penetrate into the innermost hearts of all today and cause them to acknowledge God's mighty power in fulfilling prophecy.
Right? And let's go to the 104, 8 tract 104. An
Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord.
Now, that's Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 3 to 4. Right? An Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to their
10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of the Lord forever.
Right? Why?
Because they met you not with bread
Right?
and with water in the way.
So at last, when the Ammonites when they refused the passage of the Israelites from Egypt through the land, God had to declare, Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 3 to 4, and say, no more in my house, no more. The Ammonites, the Moabites shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Is that not true? When he says, when he invited us for the marriage supper, what did we say? Some said, I'm married. Some said, I've got a land. Some say different excuses. But when God said, okay, go to the hedges and highways and invite, the marriage supper was full. Why? Because we dilly-dallied. We dilly-dallied. Some Moabites blocked even the word of God entrance to the people, so that the people go out to keep the feast of the Lord. They blocked it, and the people in the highways and the streets are the ones who were allowed only to enter into the kingdom. Now, when God will pass a statement to say no more, when his mercy, which has been lingering for the people of Israel, for the people to join in the strange doctrine of Abraham and Lot, there is a time the cup will be full. The cup will go full. And when he closes the probation for the church, he will have declared that no more, no Ammonite, no Moabites, no, because they don't know where they come from, and they don't know where they are going. They don't know which is the end, and they don't know which is the beginning. They only know the wall, the name of the wall, instead of knowing the doctrine in the Bible, the doctrine of God in the Bible. The name of the wall is the one that they are fighting for. The Ammonites, the Moabites, the fate of the Ammonites and the Moabites, they will miss it all when God will declare a statement that no one will be found in the congregation of the kingdom. May God help us when we are struggling very hard to prepare for the end of time, for the last day when God comes to count one by one into the kingdom. May you be found, and may I be found. May we all be found and be happy and say, in the lockdown, we had a program with BSM TV which made me know even all these prophecies which no one will make me know. So much has been given to the house of God so that they do not know, they do not even read the Bible, they do not even read the spiritual prophets. They read something strange that is not even in the Bible. Now let me tell you one thing. The true ones, the very elect, will run for dear life and will know what substance to read for them to be saved. May God bless the word.